You can have the condo listed by Friday, my mother said, sliding a real estate agent's card across the dining table. That gives us enough time to close before Jenna's tax deadline. For several seconds, I thought I had misunderstood her. My father sat beside her with both hands folded over his stomach, wearing the expression he usually reserved for conversations he believed had already been decided. My younger sister, Jenna, stared into her untouched coffee. I looked from the realtor's card to my mother. You're asking me to sell my home. We're not asking you to become homeless, Dad said. You have equity. You can buy something smaller later. Mom leaned toward me. Your sister owes the government $92,000, Claire. This is not the time to be territorial about a condo. Territorial. As though the two-bedroom home I had spent 11 years saving for was an extra family vehicle parked in my name. As though Jenna's tax debt had somehow become my mortgage. As though my parents had not spent the previous decade calling every dollar I gave my sister temporary. I reached down beside my chair and lifted a thick black accordion folder onto the table. Mom's expression changed. She had expected resistance. Maybe tears, maybe another exhausted promise that I would see what I could do. She had not expected records. I brought something too, I said. Welcome to Reddit Gossip R. This is the story of the day my parents tried to turn my home into the final payment for my sister's mistakes, and discovered I had kept track of every emergency they had asked me to forget. My name is Claire Bennett. I was 37 when this happened, and I worked as a risk analyst for a regional credit union outside Columbus, Ohio. My job was not glamorous. I reviewed loan applications, examined account histories, checked whether numbers supported the stories people told about them, and documented anything that did not fit. At work, nobody was offended when I asked for a receipt. You in my family, asking for documentation was treated as a personality defect. Jenna was 4 years younger than me and had always been described as creative. When we were children, that meant she could turn cardboard boxes into castles. When we were adults, it meant she opened businesses without budgets, planned events before checking her bank balance, and treated due dates as aggressive suggestions. Our parents called me practical. For years, I thought that was praise. Eventually, I understood that practical was the word they used when they needed me to absorb consequences without making anyone uncomfortable. The first loan happened when Jenna was 24. Her car needed a new transmission, and she claimed she would lose her job if she could not drive to work. Mom called me while I was grocery shopping. It's only $3,800, she said. Only. I had been earning $46,000 a year at the time. I transferred the money that afternoon. Jenna promised to repay me within 6 months. She made 2 payments of $100, then stopped. The second loan came 8 months later when she fell behind on rent. The third paid an emergency dental bill. The fourth covered deposits for a small event planning company she started with a college friend. Every request arrived with the same language. She just needed breathing room. This was the last emergency. Family helped family. I was lucky to be stable. Jenna would remember what I had done when she was successful. At first, I kept the records because I needed to budget. Then I kept them because my family's memory kept changing. Loan would become help. Help would become a gift. A gift would become something I had supposedly volunteered before anyone asked. By the time Jenna was 32, I had transferred her $68,400. Not all at once. That was what made it easy to deny. There was no dramatic suitcase of cash. There were 23 separate transfers over 8 years. $4,000 here, $6,000 there. $900 for an insurance deductible. $12,000 for inventory. $7,500 for a wedding venue deposit after her fiancé's parents backed out. Jenna did not marry that fiancé. The venue kept most of the deposit. My parents insisted she had suffered enough without being reminded of the money. I had signed notes for the larger loans, transfer confirmations for all of them, emails describing repayment plans, and text messages in which both my parents assured me everything would eventually be settled. I did not charge interest. I did not set aggressive deadlines. I did not take collateral. My mistake was believing that generosity and documentation could coexist without conflict. I thought the records protected the truth. I did not understand that people who benefit from your silence eventually begin to see the truth itself as an attack. My condo was the one thing I had never allowed them to touch. I bought it 3 years before that Sunday lunch. It was not luxurious. It had 2 bedrooms, a narrow balcony, an outdated kitchen, and a living room window that looked over a row of maple trees and the parking lot of a dental office. But it was mine. I had saved for the down payment while renting a basement apartment with pipes that knocked all winter. I took weekend certification courses, accepted extra audits, and drove the same 12-year-old Honda until the passenger door stopped unlocking from the outside. On the day I closed, My mother gave me a brass keychain shaped like a small house. Now you'll always have somewhere safe, she said. I gave her an emergency key 6 months later. That key became important. At the dining table, I did not open the black folder immediately. I asked the most obvious question first. How did Jenna end up owing $92,000? Jenna rubbed the edge of her coffee cup. My accountant made mistakes. What kind of mistakes? He classified things wrong. Income? Some of it. Payroll withholding? Her eyes lifted. That was my answer. Jenna's event planning company had grown during the previous 3 years. She coordinated weddings, corporate parties, and charity events. Her social media pages showed flower walls, champagne towers, and tables covered in gold-rimmed plates. What they did not show was that she frequently used client deposits to pay old vendor bills. She had hired part-time assistants, but apparently had not handled payroll taxes correctly. The $92,000 included federal income tax, penalties, and unpaid payroll obligations. That was serious. It was not, however, a reason to sell my home within 3 weeks. Has she spoken to a tax attorney? I asked. Dad exhaled sharply. We have spoken to people. What people? Professionals. Is there an installment option? Mom's lips tightened. Claire, this is exactly what you do. You hide behind procedures while someone else is drowning. I'm asking whether Jenna has explored a payment plan. She needs a substantial payment immediately, Dad said. Otherwise, they can freeze accounts and destroy the business. Jenna finally spoke. My attorney said a large voluntary payment would help. How large? $60,000. And the rest? I would arrange payments. I looked at her. What assets does the business have? Mom slapped her palm lightly against the table. This is not one of your credit union interviews. No, I said. In one of my interviews, the borrower has to answer. Dad pushed the realtor's card closer to me. The condo is worth at least $310,000. You owe what? 140? 136. Then there is more than enough equity. There it was. They knew my mortgage balance. I had never told them the current number. How do you know what I owe? No one answered immediately. Mom glanced at Dad. Jenna looked genuinely confused. Dad cleared his throat. We estimated. You estimated within a few $1,000s? You talk about finances all the time. I have never discussed my mortgage balance with you. Mom straightened. This suspicious attitude is exactly why the family can't solve anything together. I put one hand on the black folder. I will help Jenna review the tax notices. I will help her organize the documents. I will even attend a meeting with her attorney if she wants me there. But I am not selling my condo. Jenna's face hardened. You always do this. Do what? Make me beg. You have borrowed more than $68,000 from me. Mom shook her head. Do not start inflating numbers. I opened the folder. The first section contained a summary sheet. Every loan was listed by date, amount, purpose, transfer reference, and promised repayment date. Dad did not look at it. Instead, he leaned back and gave me a disappointed smile. So that's why you brought the folder. You came prepared to humiliate your sister. No, I came prepared because you asked me to sell my home. We scheduled this lunch to find a solution. You scheduled this lunch to announce a solution involving my property. Mom stood and began gathering cups that were still full. I can't listen to you talk about family like we're strangers negotiating a contract. That is interesting, I said, because you brought me a realtor. Jenna pushed her chair back. I knew she would make this about old money. It is about old money, I said. Your current emergency exists on top of every previous emergency. She stared at me with an anger I had seen many times before. Underneath it, there was something else. Confusion. At that moment, I assumed she was confused because I had finally said no. I would later understand that she was confused because she believed she had already repaid a significant portion of what she owed me. Dad stood and took the realtor's card off the table. We'll give you a few days to calm down. There is nothing to reconsider. Then don't blame us when this family remembers who refused to help. I closed the folder. As I left, Mom followed me into the hallway. Her voice softened. You know Jenna isn't like you. I know. She gets overwhelmed. I know. She could lose everything she built. I turned toward her. And what do you think I would lose? Mom looked at me as though the answer were obvious. You would still have yourself. For years, that sentence would have made me feel proud. That day, it sounded like permission to take everything else. 2 days later, I came home from work and found a pair of unfamiliar shoes beside my front door. A woman in a gray blazer was standing in my living room, taking photographs. My mother was opening the balcony curtains. For one stunned second, nobody moved. Then the woman lowered her camera. "You must be Claire. Who are you?" She gave me an uncertain smile. "Dana Mills. Your mother said you were expecting me." I looked at Mom. She still had my emergency key in her hand. Dana slowly placed the camera in her bag. "I'm a real estate agent. I know what a real estate agent is. I did not invite one into my home." Mom sighed. "Please don't create a scene. You used my emergency key. We needed an accurate valuation. You entered my home without permission. You gave me a key. For emergencies. This is an emergency." Dana apologized 3 times before leaving. My mother stayed. She walked into my kitchen and placed the brass key on the counter. "I was trying to help you understand your options. You brought a stranger into my home to photograph it. You are focusing on the wrong violation." I almost laughed. What would the right violation be? Watching your sister lose her business when you could prevent it. I picked up the key. "You no longer have access to this condo." Her face changed then. Not guilt. Offense. "You are taking away my key?" "Yes. I am your mother. And this is my home. We helped you buy it." The sentence landed between us. "What did you say?" "You would not have qualified without us." "That isn't true. We gave you money for closing. You lent me $8,000 for 4 months because my certificate of deposit matured after the closing date. I repaid you in full." Mom folded her arms. "That is not how your father remembers it. I have the transfer and the repayment record." "Of course you do." She said it as though keeping proof was shameful. Then she walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned back. "Jenna understands that family is more than a collection of receipts." "No," I said. "Jenna understands that someone else will usually receive the receipt." I changed the locks that evening. That should have been the moment I realized my parents were not merely pressuring me. They were preparing a story in which my condo partly belonged to them. Instead, I told myself Mom had panicked. I still wanted a reasonable explanation because the alternative required me to reconsider my entire family. By Friday, relatives had started calling. My Aunt Diane asked whether it was true that my parents had given me $40,000 for my down payment. A cousin sent me a long message explaining that Jenna could face criminal charges. My grandmother left a voicemail asking me not to let money destroy the family. The story spread with remarkable efficiency. According to my parents, they had sacrificed part of their retirement to help me purchase the condo. Now they were only asking me to return the favor by helping Jenna. The $8,000 bridge loan became $40,000. My full repayment disappeared. The $68,000 I had loaned Jenna became occasional gifts that I was cruelly trying to collect during a crisis. For the first time, the pressure cost me something beyond money. My grandmother's 80th birthday was approaching, and I had been helping organize the dinner. 3 days after the realtor incident, Aunt Diane informed me that the location had been changed. To reduce tension, she said, "Am I still invited?" There was a pause. "Your mother thinks it may be better if everyone has space." My mother had entered my home without permission, tried to arrange its sale, lied about financing it, and I was the one removed to reduce tension. That was their first victory. They controlled the story faster than I could correct it. I wanted to call every relative and defend myself. Instead, I did what I should have done years earlier. I built a timeline. My closest friend at work was Maya Patel, a compliance manager who believed confusion became less powerful when placed in chronological order. She sat beside me in a small conference room after work while I spread copies across the table. "You don't need to prove you're generous," she said. "You need to prove what happened." "I know what happened." "Then separate what you know from what you assume." It was exactly the kind of sentence I gave other people. I hated hearing it applied to me. We organized the records into 4 categories. Money sent directly to Jenna. Money sent to vendors on Jenna's behalf. Written acknowledgments. Repayments received. The 4th category was nearly empty. According to my accounts, Jenna had repaid a total of $5,600. That left $62,800 outstanding. Maya studied the summary. "Has Jenna ever claimed she paid more?" "Not directly." "What did she say at lunch?" "That I was making the loans sound old." "No, before that." I thought back. She had said, "You always do this." Then she had looked confused when I gave the total. The next morning, I emailed Jenna. I did not accuse her of anything. I attached the summary and asked her to identify any payment she believed was missing. She responded 6 hours later. "This is ridiculous. Mom handled most of those payments." I read the message twice. Then I called her. She rejected the first call. On the second, she answered. What does that mean? I asked. What does what mean? You said Mom handled your payments. She did. How? I sent them to her. My hand tightened around the phone. Why would you send money you owed me to Mom? Because she said she was managing the family account. There is no family account. Jenna was silent. What account did you send it to? Mom and Dad's joint checking. How much? I don't know exactly. Estimate. Maybe 30,000. The room seemed to tilt. Did Mom tell you the money was reaching me? Yes. When? Whenever I paid. Do you have proof? Her voice became defensive. I'm not doing this with you. Jenna, I have received $5,600 in 8 years. That's impossible. Send me your transfer history. You're trying to make me responsible for Mom's bookkeeping. You are responsible for knowing where your debt payments went. And you're responsible for not waiting until my life is collapsing to attack me. I sent you the records because you said the total was wrong. You sent them because you wanted leverage. She hung up. 10 minutes later, Mom called. What did you say to your sister? I asked where she sent her repayments. You are deliberately destabilizing her before an important tax meeting. Did Jenna send you money intended for me? Mom did not answer. Did she? We moved money around depending on who needed it. That is not an answer. She was trying. Did you tell her she was repaying me? Claire, families do not operate like banks. You took payments on loans I made. We accepted money into a shared pool. There was no shared pool. There was always a shared understanding. Not mine. Mom's voice sharpened. You had savings. Your father and I had expenses. Jenna had a growing business. We made decisions based on need. You used my money to create a fund I never agreed to. You are twisting this. How much did she send you? I will not participate in an interrogation. She ended the call. That answer told me the missing money was real. It did not tell me how much had disappeared or where it had gone. 2 days later, Jenna sent me 3 screenshots. She intended them to prove she had paid. They showed transfers to my parents totaling $12,000 over 14 months. The notes read, Claire loan payment. Inventory repayment for Claire. Claire wedding money. I called Maya. She labeled them, I said. Good. Good? It means the purpose was clear. Keep the originals. Ask Jenna to export the full history. Jenna refused. She said the screenshots were enough and demanded that I subtract $12,000 from her balance. I told her I would credit any payment that reached me or any payment my parents returned. That made her furious. You don't get to collect twice. I haven't collected once. I paid Mom. Then Mom owes me. She said she used it for family expenses. Which family expenses? Jenna hesitated. I don't know. That was the first crack in her certainty. The following week, a certified letter arrived from an attorney representing my parents. The letter claimed they had an equitable financial interest in my condo because they had contributed to the purchase price and had been promised repayment through future appreciation. It requested that I refrain from selling, refinancing, or transferring the property until their interest was resolved. I was not planning to do any of those things, but the letter still frightened me. My parents had transformed a family lie into a legal threat. That was their second victory. They knew the claim might eventually fail. They also knew defending my home would cost time, money, and peace. I hired a property attorney named Rachel Kim. At our first meeting, I brought the black folder. She read the bridge loan agreement, the bank transfer, the repayment confirmation, and the closing statement. This is useful, she said. Useful? It is strong evidence that the $8,000 was a loan and that it was repaid. They're claiming $40,000. Then they need evidence of $40,000. They don't have it. That does not prevent them from creating stress. Her honesty was not comforting, but it was clear. Rachel sent their attorney a formal response demanding documentation supporting every claimed contribution. 3 days later, we received 12 pages of bank statements and a handwritten ledger my mother had created. The ledger listed $40,000 in supposed support for my condo. $8,000 was the real bridge loan. The remaining $32,000 consisted of unrelated expenses. A used dining table my parents had given me. Birthday gifts. A college graduation check from 14 years earlier. Money they paid for a family vacation when I was 22. They had taken every dollar they had ever spent near me and relabeled it as an investment in my home. It would have been almost funny if the bank statements had not revealed something else. Rachel had highlighted several deposits. Each came from Jenna. $4,000. $3,500. $2,800. $5,000. The dates matched the screenshots Jenna had sent me. Within days of those deposits, money left my parents' account for a kitchen renovation contractor, a cruise company, and payments on an RV loan. The statements did not show every year, but they showed enough. My parents had attached proof of taking Jenna's repayments to support a false claim against my condo. Their need to control everything had created the record that connected it all. I called Jenna and asked her to meet me at a coffee shop. She almost refused. Then I told her our parents' own attorney had provided the documents. She arrived 20 minutes late and kept her coat on. I placed copies of the statements between us. She looked at the first page. Then the second. Her face lost color. "That kitchen was done 3 years ago," she said. "Yes. They told me Dad got a bonus." I pointed to a deposit. "That was your $4,000 payment." She turned another page. The RV payment was made 2 days after she had transferred $5,000 marked Claire wedding money. "I asked Mom whether you received that one," Jenna whispered. "What did she say?" "She said you told her not to mention it because you didn't want me asking for more time." I sat back. For years, I had imagined Jenna accepting my money without thinking about repayment. The reality was more complicated. She had been irresponsible. She had borrowed repeatedly. She had also paid more than I knew. My parents had allowed each of us to believe the worst about the other, because our confusion kept them in control. "How much did you send them?" I asked. Jenna stared at the statements. "I need to check." "Check everything." Her eyes filled with tears, but I did not reach across the table. Not because I felt nothing, because tears had ended too many financial conversations in our family. "I still owe you money," she said. "Yes. I thought I owed less." "So did I." Mom said the family account made things easier. "For whom?" She closed her eyes. That evening, Jenna exported 8 years of bank activity and sent me every transfer she believed was connected to my loans. The total was $41,600. I had received $5,600. My parents had received $36,000. Some payments were clearly labeled. Others matched dates and amounts from text messages in which Mom acknowledged receiving money for me. Jenna found one message that made both of us stop speaking. "Got the $3,000. Claire will be relieved. Don't contact her about it tonight. She's been difficult lately." My mother had turned our separation into a system. When Jenna wanted more time, Mom told her I was angry. When I asked about repayment, Mom told me Jenna was fragile. When money arrived, Mom kept it. When Jenna needed another loan, my parents brought the request to me as though nothing had been repaid. The current tax debt was not the first emergency. It was simply the first one large enough to expose the machinery beneath all the others. Jenna and I met with her tax attorney the following Monday. His name was Daniel Foster, and he looked exhausted before we began. He explained that Jenna's debt was serious but not hopeless. She had options. She could sell non-essential business assets, reduce overhead, correct payroll filings, make an initial payment, and request an installment agreement. Nobody had ordered her to produce $60,000 within 3 weeks. That amount had been suggested by my father. "Why?" I asked. Jenna stared at the table. Daniel answered carefully. "Your parents were concerned that a prolonged review might require more detailed tracing of transfers between the business and personal accounts." Jenna's business had sometimes transferred money to my parents before payroll obligations were paid, not because my parents owned the company, because Jenna believed she was repaying family loans. The tax problem was Jenna's responsibility. But my parents wanted it resolved quickly before anyone asked why business funds had repeatedly entered their personal account. Selling my condo would have done 3 things. It would have covered a large portion of Jenna's debt. It would have prevented scrutiny of the repayments my parents had kept. And it would have replaced the money they had spent without forcing them to admit what they had done. The demand was never just about saving Jenna's business. It was about preserving the version of the family in which my parents were generous rescuers. Jenna was helpless, and I was the stable daughter whose resources appeared whenever everyone else ran out. Jenna began cooperating with Daniel. She agreed to sell her luxury SUV, cancel the lease on a decorative warehouse space she barely used, and liquidate unused event inventory. She also agreed to close the company temporarily if the numbers showed it could not survive legally. For the first time, she was making decisions based on what existed instead of what she wanted everyone to believe. My parents responded by escalating. Mom told relatives I had manipulated Jenna during a vulnerable moment. Dad said I was trying to avoid a debt I owed them. They invited the family to a meeting at their house to settle the issue before Claire destroyed relationships permanently. At first, I refused to attend. Rachel told me I did not owe anyone a public defense. Maya told me the same thing. But my grandmother called. She did not ask me to sell the condo. She asked whether my parents had truly kept money Jenna intended for me. Yes, I said. Why would they do that? I think you should ask them. They say the money was shared. I never agreed to share it. There was a long silence. Then she said, I don't know who to believe anymore. That hurt more than I expected. I had spent years believing that if I remained calm, reliable, and generous, the people who loved me would eventually recognize the truth of my character. Instead, they had accepted the first story that preserved their comfort. That night, I sat alone in my living room with the black folder open on the floor. The condo was quiet. The new lock on the front door reflected the light from the hallway. I realized I had been trying to save two things at once: my home and my identity as the daughter who could fix anything without making anyone choose sides. I could protect one. The other had to end. I called Rachel and asked whether presenting the records at the family meeting would damage my legal position. She helped me identify what I could share. Then I called Jenna. I will attend, I said. But I'm not going to argue about whether I'm a good sister. What are you going to do? Correct the record. Mom will say you're attacking her. She can say anything she wants. What do you need from me? It was the first time Jenna had asked that question. Tell the truth about where you sent the payments. She was silent. If I do that, Dad may never forgive me. Then decide whether forgiveness that requires a lie is worth having. The meeting took place on a Saturday afternoon at the same dining table where my parents had demanded I sell my condo. Mom had arranged coffee, pastries, and folders at every seat, as though presentation could make her version more official. Dad sat at the head of the table. Aunt Diane was there, along with my grandmother, Jenna, and Daniel, the tax attorney. My parents' attorney joined by video. Rachel sat beside me. Mom began before everyone had settled. We are here because private family matters have been turned into accusations. Rachel raised a hand slightly. We are here because your attorney asserted a financial interest in my client's property. Dad frowned. This does not need to become hostile. It became a legal matter when you sent the letter, I said. Mom looked toward my grandmother. Do you see how she speaks to us now? Grandma did not answer. Dad opened one of the folders. We supported Claire for years. We helped her establish herself. We contributed to her condo, and now during the first serious crisis her sister has faced. The first serious crisis? I asked. Rachel touched my wrist, reminding me not to be pulled into every false statement. Dad continued. Claire is using old gifts to punish Jenna and refusing to acknowledge our investment in her home. I placed the closing statement on the table. My condo was purchased for $248,000. The down payment came from my savings account and a matured certificate of deposit. 4 months before closing, Mom and Dad lent me $8,000 as a temporary bridge. Mom interrupted. We gave you more than that over the years. I'm talking about the condo. I placed the signed bridge loan agreement beside the statement. The agreement identifies the $8,000 as a loan. Then I placed the repayment confirmation on top. I repaid it in full 4 months later. Aunt Diane leaned forward. What about the $40,000? There was no $40,000 contribution. Dad pushed his handwritten ledger toward the center. It is all documented. I read the first few entries aloud. Dining table, $900. Graduation gift, $2,000. Family vacation, $3,400. Birthday checks over 10 years, $6,000. I looked at him. You counted gifts from my 20s as equity in a condo I bought at 34. We invested in your future, Mom said. Parents supporting their child does not create ownership in every asset that child later earns. Their attorney spoke from the screen. The issue is whether there was an understanding. There was, Rachel said. The written understanding states $8,000, repaid in full. Dad's face reddened. This obsession with technicalities is why we are in this mess. No, I said. The absence of technicalities is how you created it. I opened the black folder. The first section contained the 23 transfers I had made for Jenna. I did not read every one. I summarized them by year and purpose. Car repair, rent, medical bills, business inventory, vendor deposits, wedding expenses, insurance, payroll. The total was $68,400. Jenna spoke quietly. That total is correct. Mom turned toward her. You do not need to participate in this performance. Jenna's hands trembled, but she continued. I borrowed the money. Aunt Diane looked at me. But didn't you call them gifts? No. I placed signed acknowledgements and emails on the table. In each case over $2,000, the word loan appears in writing. For smaller amounts, the transfer notes or messages identify repayment terms. Mom gave a sharp laugh. You made your little sister sign contracts during emergencies. I documented the promises all three of you made. Dad looked at Jenna. You were under pressure. You may not have understood what you signed. I understood, she said. He stopped. That was the first shift in the room. I moved to the next section. According to my accounts, Jenna repaid $5,600 directly to me. Mom seized on it. There. She was repaying you. She repaid another $36,000 to you. The room went still. Dad looked at the attorney's screen. Mom's voice lowered. That money entered a family account. No account was identified as a family account. We managed money where it was needed. Jenna, why did you transfer it to them? I asked. Jenna looked at our mother. Because Mom told me she was passing it to Claire. That is not what I said, Mom replied immediately. Jenna unlocked her phone. You texted me after the $3,000 payment. She read the message aloud. Got the $3,000. Claire will be relieved. Don't contact her about it tonight. She's been difficult lately. Aunt Diane covered her mouth. Mom shook her head. That was taken out of context. What context changes the recipient? Rachel asked. Dad leaned forward. Even if some funds were redirected, Claire was financially secure. I looked at him. Redirected. He realized too late that he had accepted the central fact. I placed copies of the bank statements their own attorney had provided. These are the exhibits submitted to support your supposed investment in my condo. Their attorney's face tightened on the screen. I continued. They also show Jenna's deposits entering your account. I placed Jenna's transfer screenshots beside them. The dates and amounts match. Then I added 3 highlighted statement pages. Within days, those funds were sent to a kitchen contractor, a cruise company, and an RV lender. Mom looked toward Dad. Dad looked at the papers. Aunt Diane whispered, You used Claire's repayments for the remodel? We used household funds, Mom said. Funds you told Jenna were being sent to Claire, I replied. We had expenses. So did I. You had savings. Because I did not spend money I owed to someone else. Dad struck the table with his palm. Enough. We are not criminals. Nobody had called them criminals. His attorney muted himself for several seconds. Daniel, who had remained quiet, opened his own folder. The transfers are also relevant to Jenna's tax matter, he said. Some were made from the business account during periods when payroll obligations were unpaid. Mom turned toward him. You told us repayment showed good faith. Repayment to a legitimate creditor can be explained. Transfers to third parties who retain the money require accurate documentation. Dad's voice rose. That is why we need to settle the tax debt quickly. There it was. Not a confession. Something more useful. A motive. I looked at him. You wanted my condo sold so the payment would stop anyone from tracing the earlier transfers. We wanted to protect Jenna. You wanted to replace the money you took without admitting you took it. Mom began to cry. Not loudly. She pressed a napkin to her face and looked toward Grandma. We spent our lives holding this family together. Grandma's expression was unreadable. Mom continued. Claire never needed help the way Jenna did. Every parent understands that children require different things. I had heard that argument my entire life. Jenna needed money. I needed patience. Jenna needed protection. I needed to understand. Jenna needed second chances. I needed to stop keeping score. I closed the folder. You were allowed to give Jenna your money, I said. You were not allowed to give her mine. Mom lowered the napkin. We never intended to hurt you. You entered my home with a realtor. We were desperate. You claimed ownership of my condo. We wanted you to listen. You told the family I was refusing to return money you invested. You were being selfish. And you kept $36,000 that Jenna believed she was repaying to me. Dad stood. You are acting as if you built your life alone. I looked up at him. No, I built it while carrying people who kept telling me the weight did not count. Nobody spoke. Dad turned to Jenna. If you support this, do not expect us to rescue your company. Jenna's face crumpled. For one moment, I thought she would retreat. That had always been the pattern. My parents threatened withdrawal. Jenna panicked. I repaired the damage. Instead, she took a breath. You are not rescuing it, she said. Claire and I are cleaning up what I did. Mom stared at her. After everything we sacrificed for you? You used the money I sent for Claire. We used it for this family. You told me she was receiving it. You would have stopped paying if you knew she already had enough. Jenna went completely still. Mom had finally said the quiet part aloud. She had kept the truth from Jenna because deception made the payments continue. Grandma pushed her chair away from the table. I need to go home. Mom reached toward her. Mother, please. Grandma looked at her daughter with an expression I had never seen before. You asked me to exclude Claire from my birthday because you said she was punishing Jenna over gifts. Mom's mouth opened. Grandma continued. You knew they were loans. You knew Jenna had been paying, and you knew Claire was not receiving the money. We were trying to prevent a fight. You created one. Aunt Diane began gathering the papers in front of her. I repeated what you told me, she said. I told my children Claire was trying to take advantage of Jenna. Mom whispered. I was under pressure. So was Claire, Aunt Diane replied. Not everyone changed sides. Dad continued insisting the money had supported the family. Mom continued describing intention instead of conduct. Their attorney requested that all future discussion go through counsel. But they could no longer define the facts without challenge. Rachel presented the final terms. My parents would withdraw their claim against my condo in writing. They would provide a complete accounting of Jenna's payments. The $36,000 they had retained would be treated as a debt owed to me, not as Jenna's unpaid balance. Jenna would remain responsible for the legitimate remainder of her loans. Nobody would contact my mortgage lender, homeowners association, employer, or realtor regarding my property. My parents would return every copy of my old key and would have no access to the condo. Dad laughed bitterly. And if we refuse? Then we proceed through the courts, Rachel said. Mom looked at me. You would sue your own parents? I would defend my home. That is not the daughter we raised. No, I said. It is the daughter you kept preparing. The meeting ended without hugs. There was no applause. My grandmother left with Aunt Diane. Daniel stayed behind to review tax documents with Jenna. My parents' attorney remained on the screen after Dad walked away, speaking quietly with Rachel about the withdrawal paperwork. Mom stood in the kitchen with her back to us. For a moment, I wanted her to turn around and give me a real apology. Not an explanation. Not tears. Not a description of how difficult parenting had been. I wanted her to say she had taken what belonged to me because she believed I would survive it, and that belief did not make the taking acceptable. She did not say it. I left anyway. Within 2 weeks, my parents withdrew the claim against the condo. Their attorney likely explained how weak it was and how damaging their own exhibits had become. They sold the RV and used part of the proceeds to make the first repayment to me. A formal schedule was established for the remainder. They missed the third payment. Rachel sent one letter. They caught up the following week. Jenna sold her SUV, closed the warehouse, and reduced her staff while correcting the payroll filings. The tax authorities accepted an installment arrangement after she made a substantial payment from the asset sales. Her company survived, but it became smaller. For the first time, its size reflected what she could actually afford. She still owed me $27,200 after crediting her direct payments and the money my parents had retained. We signed a clear repayment agreement. Not because I trusted paper more than people. Because trustworthy people do not ask you to pretend obligations do not exist. Jenna and I did not become close overnight. There were months when our conversations were limited to payment confirmations and tax updates. She apologized more than once. The first apology focused on how confused she had been. I told her confusion explained part of her behavior, but did not erase the years she kept borrowing. The second apology was different. I treated your stability like it regenerated on its own, she said. I never asked what it cost you to keep fixing things. That was the first apology I believed. Not because it repaired everything, because it named what she had done. My aunt publicly corrected the story with the relatives she had contacted. My grandmother invited me to lunch and apologized for excluding me from her birthday. I accepted her apology, but I did not pretend it had not changed something. Trust returned in smaller portions. My parents asked to attend family counseling. I agreed to one session. Mom spent most of it explaining that she had always worried Jenna would fail without help. The therapist asked why that fear entitled her to use my money. Mom cried. Dad said the therapist was biased. They did not schedule another session. I moved to low contact. They did not receive another key. They did not receive updates about my savings, mortgage, salary, or plans. When they asked for financial help, I sent information about professionals, payment plans, or community resources. I did not send money. 6 months after the family meeting, Maya came over to help me repaint the second bedroom. For years, it had functioned as storage for boxes, old work files, and things I had accepted from relatives because saying no required more energy than carrying them home. We cleared it out. I turned the room into a small office with a reading chair beside the window. When we finished, I placed the black accordion folder in a fireproof cabinet. It still held the loan records. But it no longer felt like a collection of accusations. It was evidence that my memory had not failed me. Evidence that generosity did not require self-erasure. Evidence that keeping records was not the reason my family fractured. The fracture came from people believing my resources belonged to them simply because I had survived previous losses quietly. Before Maya left, I placed a new brass key in her hand. It was not the old key with the little house-shaped chain. I had thrown that key away after changing the locks. This one was plain. Emergency access, I said. She smiled. Actual emergencies? Actual emergencies. Actual emergencies. For the first time, giving someone a key did not feel like surrendering part of my home. It felt like choosing who had earned entry. My parents believed family meant permanent access. Access to my money. Access to my labor. Access to my home. Access to the version of me that never said no. I learned that a boundary is not a punishment. It is a door with a lock. And being related to someone does not automatically place the key in their hands. Thank you for listening to Reddit Gossip R.